On today's episode, we get to talk with my good buddy Brandon on how he succeeded through challenges and adversity of being blind. Coming up. In today's episode, you're going to feel empowered, unstoppable, and gain the tools to accomplish anything you can dream of, using real examples from some of the most successful entrepreneurs in the world. That's all happening today on the I Can Show. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the I Can Show podcast. It's the podcast that shows you the realm of possibilities and how you can succeed in your passion. I'm super excited today because we're now in season 2. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. We are in season 2, episode 17 of the I Can Show podcast. If you get a chance to listen to season 1 on our shows, you'll notice that we sort of talk about more famous celebrities, people like Walt Disney, Gary Vaynerchuk, Tony Robbins, Walt Disney, Dr. Seuss, etc. Now we're going to talk and focus more with real people. We did a little bit of that in season 1, but now we're going to try and do that every single week where we talk with people on how they succeeded in their passion and dealt with their challenges. So I'm super excited because we're going to talk with my good buddy Brandon, and we're going to speak about that in just 1 second. So can everyone please give a good round of applause to our guest for today, Brandon Schiafone. So Brandon, could you tell me about, your journey, your past life, on how you sort of went through the phase of becoming blind and, how were you able to succeed through that?
Oh man, that's kind of a loaded question. So I was born with a condition called Alström syndrome, and what this is it's a rare medical condition, genetic, that has affected about 1,000 to 1,500 people in known medical history, and it attacks the eyes and the ears and vital organs and whatnot. I was lucky enough to be on kind of the lower end of things where, I haven't really seen too much in the way of the effects. I mean, of course, it's very evident in my life because I can no longer see and my hearing isn't 100%. Um, so I still have that. But when I was born, I had roughly a vision acuity of about 20 over 300, or maybe a little less. And that was it helped me to function. I never had to walk with a cane or anything like that. I could read books and whatnot. Then around age 18 or so, or I guess around age 20 or so, I started to see a little bit of a depletion in the vision. And then about 3 years later, around age 23, I went fully blind. And um, now I still can see some lights and whatnot, but that's kind of how the vision started to where it is now. In terms of, I guess, everyday challenges, I mean, up until fairly recently, I had a bit of a fear of, kind of walking down the street and crossing the roads and whatnot, just because, especially with electric cars, like I sort of have to rely on my hearing, which isn't the greatest. And of course, those don't make a whole lot of noise, so I kind of worry about them. But, it's that was one of the biggest things for me, was really kind of learning how to navigate the world a little bit more in terms of relying not so much on my eyes, but on other senses that I have. And sometimes even on people, I have to be afraid to not ask questions and sort of make sure that if there's someone around that, I'm not afraid to sort of say, hey, can you give me a hand? Just because I'm not really sure where I'm going. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, other than that, there's, I can't drive, although I often ask people if I can. um, and you have to rely on certain, like, thank goodness for the amount of technology that we've come out with recently. I can access audiobooks and descriptive videos and whatnot, so that's wonderful. We've really developed as far as that goes in terms of entertainment options, allowing those to be open to me and whatnot. And yeah, I'm really thankful for where we've come, or how far we've come as a community in terms of making everyday things available to people with visual impairments.
Yeah, that's really, really fascinating. So, Brandon, could you tell me a little bit about sort of like your work life? Like, I know that you're a speaker and you're a comedian. You do a lot of work with like Mo Mondays and TED Talk, which we're going to talk about in just a few moments. But tell me a bit about your work life. So, what do you do?
So I started off in media. I really wanted to be a journalist when I was kind of deciding what I wanted to do career wise. And I went and I got my journalism degree. and I got into the industry, and I was not happy with the direction it was taking. So, it was hard not to feel like those 4 years were kind of wasted. But I ended up getting a job at a pretty large media company in the sales department. I learned quite a lot from there, so that was always wonderful. But after that, I decided I want to do something more in the lines of the social work kind of field. So for a while, I was working mentoring youth in grades 7 and 8 with the Catholic Family Services of Halton Peel region. I would go into schools and kind of give seminars on character development for those kids. And I worked at a job development program with the Canadian Council of Rehabilitation and Work, helping disabled youth find jobs. And I actually went through that particular program until I landed my sales job initially. But after a while, I was kind of I didn't really feel like I was passionate where I was. And I started to think to myself, well, what drives me? What do I love to do? And I never really considered personal development as a potential field until one day when a mentor of mine brought me to a seminar run by Avalon Empowerment, who train in neurolinguistic programming. Now, for the people who happen to hear and listen to this, I don't think I have enough time to explain all of what neurolinguistic programming encompasses. So if you haven't had a chance to kind of get to know what that is, I encourage you to look it up. But they trained in that, and I really kind of stepped into that world, and I learned a little bit about what the personal development world, and at the same time, I went to my very first Mo Mondays to see that particular mentor who brought me to that seminar speak. And I stepped into Mo Mondays, and I just absolutely loved the vibe and the energy, the community that was involved. And before I went to this, like anytime I had to step on stage, I would just be tremors. Like I couldn't do it. I could just stand there and I'd be shaking. My whole body would be just quaking. And then the month after I went and saw my mentor speak, I got up on the stage myself. And this was at the Hamilton Mo Mondays when it was running. Um, and I fell in love. I fell absolutely in love with it. I'm like, this is something that I want to bring home to my community. So I did that. And I also got my neurolinguistic programming certifications, both my prac and master practitioner level. And I also enrolled in a degree in psychology. And I've decided that what am I truly passionate about? Well, people ask about disability empowerment. And while it's great and I like to be a part of that in a way, it's not really what I'm passionate about. So really, I found out that I'm passionate about relationship counseling, relationship coaching, relationship therapy, and two sides of that coin kind of come together. For me, it's I work with couples who are trying to get the spark back in their relationship after a while of being together, as well as with single folks who are just continuously attracting the wrong kind of person in their life. And the reason that I'm so passionate about that is because I was just like, it sounds weird to say, but I love love. Like it's so great to see people happy and loving and in their relationships. And loneliness is such a big problem these days. And having a good, solid relationship and knowing how to maintain and build and grow in your relationships is really a key catalyst to helping alleviate that problem. So that's where I am right now in terms of coaching. Now I'm looking to become a therapist, but until such times I've finished my formal education, I can't call myself that right now. So I'm right now work under the umbrella as coach, and I'm also doing a lot of public speaking as well as hosting TedX Newmarket. So that's kind of where I stand now.
That's awesome. So could you also tell me about the TedX Newmarket? So how did that all come together?
So I obviously fell in love with public speaking. I hosted on Mondays Aurora for 2 years before we decided to move on. And I was speaking to my business partner in the matter, Bob Minhas, and we were kind of talking about, different things that we can bring to the community because we're really passionate about our community and growing as our community and the development of the community. And so, well, what can we bring here? And, we just got talking one day and he said, well, how about TEDx? And I'm like, that's wonderful. That's amazing. That's a great idea. I love TED. And I think there's a lot of people out there who do. It's such a great platform. But where can we do it? What's a good community to do it in? And Bob, who happens to know everybody, said, well, how about we reach out to Newmarket? I know they have some great people up at the town there whom I think would love to help us. So we reached out to the town of Newmarket, and we have a couple of people from Todd Kyle from the Newmarket Public Library and Janice Luttrell from the municipality. They came together with us and we formed our committee, and I applied for a license, and TedX said yes, absolutely. So we got together and we formed our committee, and within a couple of months, TedX Newmarket was born, and we had our first event on November 22nd of 2018, and it was a wonderful success. So we're looking forward to kind of building that as time goes on.
That's interesting. So now I want to pick your brain a little bit, Brandon, regarding your relationships. And I would love to
Sure.
ask you, so when you deal with couples in their relationship, what's some of the biggest challenges regarding, bringing a relationship together? What sort of things do you see a lot?
So number one, and this is going to sound cliche, but it's the honest to God truth, is communication. And communication comes in a variety of formats in terms of communication with conflict, communication with parenting, communication with money, communication with housework, communication with sex. Like everything comes down to that. And sometimes it's the most minimal of communication breakdowns that could lead to such a catastrophe in a relationship. And when clients come and talk to me, a lot of times, we don't have to go very far, they have very many sessions before we're on track to fixing it, because it's just such a small communication breakdown. Once you teach them how to communicate better with each other, how to communicate better in all facets of the relationship, as long as they're willing to put the work in, and that's what it's about 100%, is them being willing to make the changes that they need to make. Once they're able to do that, once they're willing to do that, and once they're educated on how to do that, things really do open up. That's the biggest one, is communication, understanding how to communicate, how to solve conflict. Of course, sex is another big one, but that's a more complicated kind of scenario, because in terms of the complications around sex, a lot of times that can come from childhood traumas or instances that people experience throughout their lives, and that involves a more therapeutic approach a lot of times. So you kind of have to fall back on the traditional therapy of things. But yeah, really the three big ones are sex, communication, and money, not necessarily in that order.
Right. Now, when you say money, so how does money play into a relationship?
Okay, so that can be a little more complex as well, because money and lack thereof, uh, it basically breeds stress. So if there's no money, people stress out, and because they can't afford this and that and the other thing, and sometimes people just give up. Like they've gone through the stress of not having money for so long that instead of putting themselves out there to try and figure out how to solve the problem, or maybe how to, change their scenario, they just fight. Either they fight and they're comfortable in fighting because it's easier than having to try and go out and make the change, or they split off. They just say, you know what, I'm done with this fighting. I'm done with this stress, and I'm going to leave now. So when money comes into it, it's a huge stressor for people. But really, what they're looking for when they come in and have complications with money is literally a strategy. They're running a bad strategy. They're not really sure how to get out of it, and they just need help and motivation and a push to try and get out there and change their situation. And it's not an easy thing to do, of course, and that's where putting the work in comes once again. But if they're willing to put in the work, and they're willing to change their strategies, and they're willing to implement a plan, eventually they can turn it around.
Okay, yeah. So I have heard of that about money where, it's not about the money itself, it's about the stress that comes from it or the lack of the money there. Something I'm also very curious about is about challenges. So obviously you deal with your own challenge regarding, being blind or relationships. They have their own challenges like money and communication, and whatnot. Everyone has some sort of challenge in their life that's preventing them from being able to succeed. So I would love to know, Brandon. So what's your thinking or philosophy regarding dealing with a challenge in general? How do you usually approach, going through some sort of a challenge?
So that's tough because everyone's situation is different.
Of course.
But the one commonality that I see And once again, this is going to sound cliche, perhaps to some of the people who are listening, but it's mindset. It's mindset, because here's the thing: if you're telling yourself over and over again you can't do it, or you're not going to succeed, or you're running a disaster film in your mind over and over again, constantly fixating on the scenarios that are not going to happen, that are not going to help, and it's not going to work out, and that's all you're focused on, you've already taken yourself out of the game. You might as well throw in the towel, because what you're doing is you're fixating on the catastrophe. And when you fixate on the catastrophe, that's the direction you head, because that's what you're convinced is how it's going to work out. And if you're convinced how it's going to work out, then that's exactly how it's going to work out. It's like, it's like that old saying: whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right. It's very important that all of us sort of set our own mindset, that we're not just setting up a negative idea of the outcome, but even more so just thinking positively. And it's not about, everything is all sunshine and rainbows. It's just about, where do you want to end up? Can you picture what the end goal is? Can you picture what the end of the finish line might look like? Can you picture what the end of the journey might look like? And when you think about it, it just becomes that. It's the law of attraction, where whatever you think is going to happen will become that. So something I'd also love to ask you, Brandon, is, so what motivates you on your day-to-day basis?
Honestly, the people I've surrounded with myself with since I've begun this have been a huge inspiration. And one of the main things, and actually this comes up as well as common issues in relationships, is learning when to walk away from a toxic one. And that can be one of the toughest things that anyone could possibly have to do, whether it be with a family or whether it be with a husband or a co-parent. Learning to walk away from a situation that might seem toxic, and cultivate healthier relationships. And between the time of me finishing my first degree and getting my first job, I did happen to fall into a bit of a depression for about 8 months, just because so many things were happening that sort of made blindness seem like a barrier, um, where it was just pulling me down and pulling me down. And once I started kind of getting involved with personal development and getting involved with um, the people who kind of helped me get my first real full-time job, and the people who involved in Mo Mondays, and surrounding myself with those folks, their energy kind of transferred. You sort of, when you surround yourself with like-minded people, the things that can come out of you are amazing. And that was really inspired me. And as much as again, it might be considered cliche, but always understanding that as bad as I might have it, or as low as I might feel about myself, things can always be worse. They could be. Like, there's, I'm totally blind and I have a hearing impairment, but there are scenarios that could make my life worse than it is, and I'm very, very lucky, and I understand that, and I appreciate that. And my parents are still in my life and are a huge help, and my family are great, and they support me as much as they can. And I'm very, very lucky in that sense. And there's just so many different ways that my life could be worse off, and I'm extremely lucky. And it's about gratitude and recognizing that every single day.
Yeah, and you're 100% right, especially regarding, like, yes, it could be worse. And to me, that all comes down to gratitude. Like, yeah, number one, look at where you are right now. I mean, you may have this challenge, but you have your health, or you might have, a roof over your head, or family, or you have access to a job, or whatever. It comes down to, stop looking at what you don't have and look at what you do have, because at the end of the day, that can really, really be some of the best motivation. So, Brandon, could you tell me what's going on in your life right now? What can we look forward to?
So, I guess first and foremost, TedX Newmarket is, we're looking for next year. Our license has not been approved just yet, but we already have plans in the works to make it a bigger and more impactful event even than our last one, which was wonderful. So we're looking to grow that. That's coming up in the next 9-10 months or so. We don't have a set date just yet, but that will be put up to the community as soon as we do. I'm going to be out speaking more and more. I'm really lucky to have just just hooked up with a speaker agent. So big shout out to Lori Dalton and her speaker agency. Really looking forward to working with her and seeing where the road takes me. Other than that, that's really it. I mean, I'm always out there in the community looking to see where I can be of help and contribution. I'm looking to put together a fundraiser for the Canadian Mental Health Association. More information on that will be coming out soon. I don't want to kind of put too much out about that too early. But those are the big things. I mean, it's just really TEDx, speaking more and kind of getting out in the community more. And of course, I'm available to anyone who feels like they could use my services, or really if they just need some advice. Like, I'm always available on social media and whatnot, so they can reach out there, and hoping that more information will be out about our CMHA fundraiser soon.
That's really exciting. So for everyone that's listening and watching, so you can get more information at TedX Newmarket at tedxnewmarket.ca. And if you want to check out more information from Brandon Schiafone, you can go to brandonschiafone.com, and we're going to have all the links in the description of wherever you're listening or watching this podcast episode. Brandon, I have one very important question to ask you, and that is for anyone that's listening right now, for our audiences, our listeners that are just going through some sort of a challenge and they really just would like to know how they can succeed in their field, in their passion, how they can get over their own challenges. What would be your advice for them?
Ooh, honestly, just keep going. I mean, you don't do anything, you don't help yourself at all by allowing your painful moments to engulf you, because then you drift into suffering, and suffering doesn't help you. Suffering just keeps you where you are. Push forward, push through. You know you have the resources, and if you don't find them, there are always resources out in the community, people you can access, and that'll be the biggest thing to help push you forward. Accessing your resources, knowing where you can go, and always making sure to use them and be open to the opportunity.
Yep, 100%. Well, again, thank you so much, Brandon, for being a part of this podcast. I really, really appreciate the wisdom and the value that you bring. Thank you so very, very much.
Excellent. Thank you, James.
All right, so that was Brandon Schiafone, ladies and gentlemen. I hope that really, really inspires you guys. And listen, if you got any value out of this episode, I would love to also invite you to our merchandise shop at shop.spreadshirt.ca/ICANShow. Anytime you purchase any of our merchandise, you're further supporting this podcast. We can continue to make more episodes and get into the community. Also, do you have a story that you want to tell? Do you have some sort of a journey that you want to get out there and help motivate other entrepreneurs? I would love to invite you to please connect with us at icanshowpodcast@gmail.com. I'm going to have all the links to our t-shirts and this email in the description of wherever you're listening or watching this. But that's icanshowpodcast@gmail.com. Please get in touch with us so we can help get that journey out. And our mission is we want to get as far into the community and inspire as many entrepreneurs as possible. So if you have a story, please reach out to us. You can also connect to us via social media. We're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, we're on YouTube. You can listen to this podcast on iTunes or Spotify. And if you want to check out any of those sites, please do. We post daily inspirations on our Instagram and our Facebook especially. You can also join our Facebook group on I Can Show Listeners on Facebook. Join that and you get all the daily inspiration and whatnot, and all the news and updates. But listen, I also want to thank you guys so much for your time. Thank you so much for joining us, and I hope this brought you any value. And if it did, please let us know by rating this episode or commenting or leaving a review wherever you're listening or watching this episode. That would mean so much. But for now, I wish you the very best of luck. Thank you so much again for listening to our very first episode of Season 2 of the I Can Show podcast. We look forward to next week when we get to talk with Louisa Barbosa from her band Louisa and the Planets. Thank you very much and have the most wonderful day. You can do it. Bye for now.